What I want to talk about today is why church. We're at a time in our society where most people don't go to church, don't have a background in church, don't know much about church, or aren't even thinking about church. And so the question that people keep asking me is, what do you do? How do you find any kind of inner peace and security if you don't have a church community? Because obviously a lot of the people I work with have a church community. So I want to talk a little bit about that, about why church. I was raised in church until I went to college, and then I said, that's enough. And I walked away from church. And so for a number of years, I had no faith community, no faith connections, nothing like that. And I got to say, I explored a lot of options. I didn't find things that really connected with me. They were good for other people. I had a few experiences where people were so on fire about their faith experience that they literally backed me into corners wherever we were because they were going to tell me about what I needed that they had. Didn't really work for me, though it was dramatic. But what I also felt during that 8 or 10 year period of just not being involved in a community was that there was an emptiness inside of me. I didn't know what it was. I didn't know how to fill it. I found it wildly frustrating. Like there was something, a purpose, something that was supposed to be more in my life that I was supposed to be doing with myself, something I was called to. And no matter how much I explored, no matter how much I read or who I talked to, I just could not find that particular experience. And then eventually we had a child. And my wife said, I'm going to church. I don't care what you do. You can do whatever you want to do, but I'm going to go to church. I'm going to take my child to church. And I very grumpily and reluctantly said, well, I'll go to church too then, because I didn't want to be that person sitting on the couch grumping at home. So I'll go to church too, fine. But we're going to the Episcopal church, because I had been there, and the people were very welcoming. So went to church, and I don't remember that first Sunday. I don't remember that anything fell from heaven or anybody talked, and I was completely amazed. But I kept going back because, of course, my wife and my child kept going back to church. And gradually over time, what I found was that I was in a community of people that genuinely cared about me, genuinely cared about what happened to me, genuinely cared about my family, and that I was being raised up and supported in my life, that when other areas fell down, I had something to lean back on. First, I just had people. I had a community, which was good. I was living in the Midwest at that point. I was living in the North. And people were very individualistic there. Everybody was expected to do their own thing, live their own life, and stay out of my way. But I found that in that particular church, I had a safety net, a faith community, people that cared about me, held me up, prayed for me, and wanted to know what was going on with me, genuinely cared in a way that I didn't have in my own family, in a way that I didn't have when I went to work, or even among my friends. Friends cared to a certain degree, but then it was like, go on, do your own thing. So first I found that church was just a connection of people, community that meant something to me. But then eventually what I also began to find was that it was filling that hole inside of me and that spiritual longing inside of me too for higher purpose and higher calling. One of the first things I had to do was really ask myself, who is God? I came from a position of atheism, a position of just not only not believing in God, but being angry with the idea of God. I had been raised with a God that was so toxic and unpleasant that as a young adult I said, that can't possibly be right, so there must not be a God, because that's a mess. And so I had a lot of anger and a lot of confusion and wasn't really open to the idea of God. So church at first was just a collection of people who cared for me and moved me tremendously inside, and eventually their presence softened me enough, made me feel safe enough that I could begin to address and ask those questions and say, okay, they think there's a God out there. Maybe they're right. There are a lot of them and there's only one of me. So let me start asking the questions and doing the work I need to do. And I began to look at the pain and the barriers in my own life. And I found a community that was willing to support me. They didn't push me to believe anything. They just really were there, genuinely caring for me. And eventually what I discovered is that that's the best of Christianity. That's the heart of Christianity, is supporting one another. Eventually, of course, I did find God. I found a God that was loving and generous and caring, and that just delighted in each person, delights in me, delights in you, knows your name, is there for you and with you, whether the times are good or bad. There's a God that walks with you. I found it through those people. I found that God and that Spirit of God flowing through them into me. I can remember more experiences than I can count, where people just cared for me and for us during hard times, low times, or even just normal times. You just knew that someone was there. And eventually I could face the hard times in my own life, ask my own hard questions, and with time, find the answers that I needed, so that not only was I healed and transformed, but then I could be that presence and that person that passed that on, paid that forward to the next person and said, okay, I'll listen to you when you struggle, when you're in trouble. I'll listen to you. I don't have magic answers, but I'll hold you up in prayer. I'll be present with you here, and I will walk with you for as long as we need to walk together. And so eventually, of course, that took me to ordained ministry. But one of the things that I think is most important these days, again, since so many people do not have a connection to a church or a faith community of any kind, is to seek out, particularly in these chaotic times where things are changing so fast and the stories are spun up in such dramatic and diametrically opposite ways, there's such a deep need for a safe place and a peaceful place where a person can just hear the voice of God, however you define that higher power. Just listen and hear that and know that you were supported. Best example I can think of, the other day I was having breakfast with someone here at church. They came in off the street and we were just sitting down and eating. And the person was pretty manic. Thoughts were racing here, there, and everywhere. But all of a sudden in the midst of that, this person stopped and said, this place helps me feel really peaceful, talking about this church. And to my knowledge, this person had never been through the door before. I'd not met them before. But there was something about this space, something about what God is doing here, and something about the way the people here are moved to care for one another that caused this person, even in the midst of the chaos going on inside of their head, to hear peace at a certain point. And so I encourage you to give us a try. We are on Facebook 7 nights a week at 6:30 doing prayer services, and then Sundays at 10:30 here, and Wednesdays at 1 o'clock doing worship. We also serve breakfast Sunday mornings at 9 a.m. for anybody that comes in. Come in, sit down, have a hot meal, sit, chat, check us out. But we would love to be your place of peace in a crazy world and be your companions on the journey as you figure out who you are and what you're called to.